Hello, and welcome to our second session of Wisconsin Trustee Training Week. I'm Jamie Matczak with the Nicolet Federated Library System in Green Bay, and also with me again today is Jean Anderson with the South Central Library System. Thank you so much for joining us. We had a great program yesterday. Hopefully some of you who were here yesterday are here today as well. And we're excited to continue today with Sally Gardner-Reed, who is the Executive Director for United for Libraries. Sally has spent nearly 20 years in library administration in New England and in the Midwest, and most recently she was the Director of the Norfolk Public Library in Virginia. She is the author of 9 books on library management, advocacy, volunteers, and fundraising, as well as numerous articles for professional library journals. She's presented programs and workshops to hundreds of friends and library groups, boards, and librarian groups nationally and internationally. She is also the 2000 recipient of ALA's Herbert and Virginia White Award for promoting libraries and librarianship, and we're so excited she is here today. So enough of me talking. Sally, the mic is yours.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank all of you who are here today. I'm thrilled that you took time out of what I hope for all of you is a beautiful summer day to listen to this. I am going to talk about friends and reinvigorating the friends groups that you have, or if you don't have one, how to start one. And what I love about friends groups and the changing nature of friends groups is that we friends are not really set up to attract today's volunteers, and I'm going to talk a lot about that. But I want to start by sort of asking you rhetorically what you think the average age of today's volunteer is. And I'm guessing in your minds you're thinking, 70, 75, 80, that in fact you hear a lot from your friends that they're aging out. But I think you'll be very surprised to learn that the average age of today's volunteer is right around 40 or 41 years old. And you can find out a whole lot of information about volunteers and their statistics at the U.S. Bureau of Labor website. So they do a lot of data collection on volunteers, and that's how I know this. And I think it's because, and this is my own guess, it didn't say in that, on that website, but my guess is that a lot of parents make up the volunteer force today, and they're working in schools and they're working, with their kids. So that probably lowers the average age. But another interesting fact is that the largest cohort of today's volunteers are baby boomers. Now, baby boomers are not those seniors who are aging out. We're the next generation down. I'm a baby boomer, and maybe many of you are as well. And additionally interesting, I find, is that even though this is the largest cohort, many of these volunteers are still also in the workforce. So that has a lot of implications about how friends need to organize or even start a friends group to attract today's volunteers. The second largest cohort, believe it or not, are the millennials. And they're doing lots of community work. And we've heard a lot, I think, on the news when the economy crashed in 2008 that a lot of college graduates were not able to find jobs, and they went into the volunteer workforce in order to at least build their resume. And I think a lot of them have kept up with that just because of the altruistic nature of volunteering and how good it feels, and the ability to contribute to your community is just such a wonderful thing. All of us who volunteer, and many of you, if not all of you listening today, volunteer in some way, whether it's on your friends or it's on the board, or even librarians listening in probably do a lot of extra volunteer work at their library and perhaps in other venues as well. So let's talk about the implications of this new generation of volunteers and what it will take to engage them. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how they're different. And this will seem really obvious to you, I think. They are more physical. We're living longer. We're staying in the workplace. You often hear of the younger people coming up the pipe in the workplace being very upset because so many of these baby boomers aren't retiring. I'm not going to be one of them. I'm going to retire right on time. Love my work, but can't wait to do other things as well. They see retirement, and this is part of, I think, living longer, as a second part of their life. It's, it's life 2.0, and they want to give back to their community. They still have those altruistic feelings. They want to be active, and it's very rare if you talk to retirees that their big goal in life is to sit in a rocking chair, and all day long and rest. They really want to be active. So they like that idea of extending. They want to be able to use their skills. They want to have meaningful volunteer opportunities. You might have a lot harder time, you might have a harder time getting people to shelve books. They really want to do something that they feel is meaningful. So what does that mean for today's Friends groups? Well, a lot of Friends are organized in a way that's really not flexible, and there aren't a wide variety of options within the Friends group. They have their committees, they have their structure. It's the way it's always been, and they don't see that it's ever going to change. So these new volunteers, they want to bring their skills and expertise. So we're going to have to start thinking of ways to do things that will engage skills and expertise. They want to know that their work makes a difference. They want to see the effects of their work. They want a very clear idea of what is expected of them, what kind of time it's going to take, what kind of training they're going to get. And you can see the difference. I think today's volunteers, the seniors, the quote aging out volunteers, came from a different generation. A lot of these women were stay-at-home moms, and they volunteered as their kind of contribution to their community. It was altruistic, but it was also sort of driven by their feeling that they had to give back, and they had the time to do that. And so they would sit in meetings, and they would, come up with ideas for fundraising and that sort of thing. And they did whatever was needed to be done. It wasn't so much, what is the expectation of this job, what kind of training am I going to have. Today's volunteers are coming out of a workforce, almost all of them, so they're used to having those expectations and time frames and training given to them in order for them to succeed at the task at hand. So these differences for Friends Group mean that the volunteer opportunities become more finite. In other words, they look for tasks that have a beginning and an end. They're project-oriented instead of scheduled, so they might be doing their volunteer work remotely, or they're doing it on their own time. They're not necessarily coming to a meeting. They want those task forces instead of committees. And again, as I said, they want to use their skills, and they do want a variety of ways to engage, including virtual. There is one thing that they don't want, and I wonder if you all can imagine what it is. They don't want meetings. So many volunteers today have spent their life at work life in meetings, and that's just not going to engage them. And now look at the way Friends are organized. They are organized to come once a month to the meeting. Everybody reports out, what they're doing and all of that sort of thing. And really, that's not going to engage today's volunteers. They will find that boring, and they really want to be given that task, told what the expectation is, told what the time frame is, given the authority actually to complete it, given the budget that's necessary to complete it, and then let them go. So you will find, though, that even though the majority of today's volunteers don't want to sit in meetings, there are a good number who would like to sit in on meetings that have energy and are meaningful. And that would be, for example, me. I would love to have the opportunity to come to meetings that are strategic planning and figuring out what we're going to do for the year ahead and how we're going to do it, and being sort of that person, and then reaching out to all these other volunteers that are out in your community to have various tasks done. Today, Friends groups typically have, and you'll hear this all the time, they have 8 to 10 people, and it's the same ones, and they recycle all their officers, and everybody of those 8 to 10 people do all the work, and they're feeling like they can't leave the friends because they do so much of the work, it won't carry on. Now, there's always going to be that one or two people, and we've all met them, right? It's somebody who's like done the book sale for umpteen years, and it's just every meeting is going, oh, I just can't continue. It's so much work. I don't know, poor me. It's just really tough. But I really need not to be doing this all the time. I'm not getting any younger, and all of that martyr stuff. And so someone steps in and says, well, you know what? Sue Davis actually said she would like to be involved in planning book sale, and the committee chair goes, oh, no, I know where everything is. I know I've got all the, parts and pieces. I know how to do it. I can do it in my sleep. We don't need anybody else doing it. And that's kind of a rub for a lot of groups, is that even though they say they're aging out, and by the way, this is not the whole group. It's usually just a couple or one or two in the group that say they're aging out, but yet they don't want to let go of the reins. And I think, one way to sort of motivate these people to make a switch that I'll be talking about is to have them on the leadership team. But the big thing is you don't do all the work. The leadership team should be made up of the executive committee, or whatever you want to call it, that does that strategic planning, decides what the year's activities are going to be, and then, as we'll see, break those activities into a variety of tasks and start reaching out to people. So as we were talking about the strategic planning, so you look and say, oh, we're going to have our book sale, we're going to have 3 author programs, one of which will be a real high-end author, and we'll do it as a moneymaker, and we will be engaged in the summer reading program, whatever they decide they want to do. And they create that strategic plan that tells what and when, and who maybe from the leadership team will be overseeing it, not doing the work, but overseeing it. And the jobs to be done should be attractive, or they should be easy and simple enough that somebody who just wants to make a contribution can easily be your volunteer. For example, if you're having an author program, you might ask your neighbors, John and Judy next door, if they would come and set up the chairs and attend the program and then put the chairs back. That's just one small thing that needs to be done, and Judy and John are off the hook now for making some kind of contribution to their library and their community. And trust me, if the tasks are discreet, if they are easy, if they are sometimes fun, I mean, I don't know that chairs up and down would be fun, but then they get to come to the program and they meet people, other volunteers. So there is that social aspect that all volunteers are looking for. And it's so easy for them to do something like that and so hard for them to say no. So you have to determine, as I'm talking about, how this is all going to work, your annual planning, and it's really important to have volunteer job descriptions, and they don't have to be onerous, and the leadership team can do this, very small job descriptions, but you should have them. For example, John and Judy, who are going to come and set up chairs, they need to know when to come. They need to know how those chairs, what kind of, is it going to be a circular situation, is it going to be theater type setup, and what time you think that they'll be done at the end, but just some really short job description, because as I said earlier, it's really important for today's volunteers to understand exactly what is expected of them. You'll be doing continuous recruitment because you're going to be bringing in a lot of people to do smaller tasks, and it is so successful, and what will happen is that you will find that, I'll pick on John and Judy a little bit more, that they'll have fun, and they'll say, well, when's your next program? We'd like to help again, or, can we bring refreshments next time, or something like that. But people will love what they've done, and you'll start recruiting people who've never been active with their friends group before. And that's another question I get all the time. We can't get active new members. We can get checkbook members, but we can't get active new members. It goes back to the fact that they don't want a big, long, year-long commitment that includes meetings, and they don't even half the time know what you're asking them to do. So, you say you can't get anybody for the membership committee or to be membership chair. Well, do you have a job description for that? Do you know what is included? What are the what kind of effort's going to have to be made? Is it going to be an hour a week or 10 hours a month, or, is it something that's continuous work, or is it something they can batch and do once in a while? All those things make a big difference when you're out there recruiting. And people will say no to you if you're not clear about what it is that you're asking. So these leadership members, before we get into the more worker bees, you should be very picky, or especially those of you who don't have a friends group or are starting one. Look for people who are dynamic and committed and connected, which is very important so that they know who to ask to do what. You want somebody who likes to think strategically and works as a team player. So even though you might be bringing the books sale chair over because that's the one person who's just really sinking her feet in and not wanting to change, that would be one way to at least incorporate her or him. But overall, you really do want to try to get people who are really committed to do this. So if you've got a group that's aging out and they're saying it and they're admitting it, and for you trustees, I'm so glad trustees are listening to this, because a lot of friends groups, if not most friends groups, start with either the librarian and or the trustees. So if you've got a group that is aging out and they're being honest about it and they really do want to change, it may be time to say, those of you who want to be on the leadership team, it's going to be different. We're not meeting every month. We might meet quarterly, and when we do it, it's going to be evaluation and strategic thinking and planning. If that's of interest to you, then you might be really great in this new environment. Otherwise, we think we need to reach out to some people and find some people who would like that kind of job opportunity, volunteer job opportunity. And being on a leadership team, again, I just think of myself, that would be something I'd really love. So meeting maybe 2 hours 4 times a year, and maybe being a liaison to a task force, just to make sure they have everything they need and they're moving along, but not that I'm doing the work. That would be really appealing to me. I'd also like to be one of those people who sets up and takes down chairs, because it's a no-brainer and it's easy and it's a great way to give. So I can see, just from my own perspective, how both sides of that coin would be attractive to a lot of people. As I said, you don't need to meet every month. And I have to reemphasize that you really need job descriptions for each project leader. So let's go back to the idea that you're going to have a book sale, 3 author programs, and somehow engage in the summer reading project. Most friends groups financially support the summer reading program, but there might be also ways that the children's librarian can help get them engaged too in various projects for the kids. Then you'll want to recruit project leaders for each event. So you want a project leader for engaging with the summer reading program. You want one for each of the 3 author programs, and you want one for the book sale. And I will say to you right now, as we get moving through this, that you'll find out that Friends do have a great model already in their annual book sale. For those of you who have them, that's exactly the type of project that is really interesting to a lot of people. And in fact, big annual book sales wouldn't be possible without all the cashiers, all the people who sort the books, all the people who make the signs, all the people who schlep books, all of that. That's an example of reaching out to many people for various discrete tasks. So we already have a model. We just need to extend it to a lot more. Project leaders need to have that job description so they know exactly what's expected of them. And they should also have, in my opinion, some obvious task force members. So let's go to the book sale, not the book sale, the author event. You find somebody who likes literary programs and is a great person to do one author program. So what you need out of that is you need to break that down, and you need to say who's going to get the author, who's going to get the venue, who's going to make refreshments, who's going to set up and take down, all of those things. And you might get some task force members right away underneath this project manager. But you should also allow the project manager to do some reaching out, him or herself. Again, today's volunteers really do like to have some autonomy and authority. And you know what? I think some of the worries that if the chiefs aren't involved in the programming and the setting up, that something could go wrong. especially that book sale chair who's done it all these years, really might be somewhat afraid that something will go wrong. And you know what? It might. And who cares? I mean, what could go wrong in the worst case scenario is that you lose a dynamic friends group. Having one author program kind of not come across as it should have, that's not the end of the world. And typically, if you're really good on the job description and you're really good on the expectations for it and you've broken down the tasks, it's going to be great.
Sally?
Yeah?
There was a question that came in, and I think it's timely right now, so I'm going to ask it of you if you don't mind. Rebecca asked, back to the no meetings thing. Have you noticed if friends groups, instead of in-person meetings, are using other technology tools like Skype or conference calls? And if so, what kinds of tools are they using?
Well, Skype is, I think, now somebody out there in the audience might correct me, but I think that's maybe a little bit more complicated for, you want everything to be as easy as you possibly can. I've used, and I know a lot of friends groups use conference calls a lot, and they seem to be really effective. I think it's very easy to set up an electronic listserv as well, but I think if you need immediate sort of one-on-one, something might have come up and you need the leadership team to get together, you can certainly do a conference call. But if somebody's used Skype successfully with a variety of people on it, and it's been easy, let me know. But I think for some, especially for those who aren't used to technology, that might be a little harder.
Yeah, I know I tried to get my mom to use it, and that was a little complicated. If that puts that into perspective, I'm not saying she's the best at tech. So, okay, thank you for answering that.
Yeah, and I think, that's going to be evolving, that technology, because as people come out of the workforce, they're going to be more and more comfortable with the technologies out there. So I think that's probably an evolving situation, but conference calls work great in my opinion. So when you're recruiting for these project managers, you really want, if you want the program to be successful, you really want to do a good job in recruiting. And this is another job for the leadership team. So you want somebody who's going to be somebody you'd hire if you were paying. So not every warm body fits every position. And you want, like that author program, you want somebody there who really loves literary events. A perfect person might be somebody at the local community college or at their local university, whatever you have, who maybe teaches, or a high school teacher who would really love doing something like that. And if you're saying, we need to we're going to have the program in September, so we need to start in May or June. We need to get the venue lined up. We need to get the author lined up. We need to order books, and all of this will be done by the project team on when everything has to be done, so that by September you've got everything set up and ready to go, and you just open your doors. You're going to have publicity, so it could be, a couple people doing the publicity. But you do want the right person in the right job. So let's say you're going to get started, maybe starting a new friends group or really working with your existing friends group to sort of reimagine how you're doing things. And this is getting back to what I was talking about. You have to decide what you need to accomplish most in the coming year. And if you're starting a friends group or if you're revitalizing, you may sort of pull back on what you normally do and limit it to a certain number of programs just for that first year as you're getting your feet wet. So like I said, the book sale is a perfect example of how people want to work today, that small discrete task where they can make a contribution, but it's not something they have to come every single month to a meeting for. If you're starting a friends group, you certainly want a membership drive, but I think every year there should be some kind of membership drive. Friends publish newsletters, almost all of them that I know of, moving maybe more into the digital newsletter. So you might be looking for a project manager who's done both, maybe has recently retired and did some kind of writing or publishing of some sort. You might decide that you're going to have a bingo night for fundraising and a traditional author event. So let's just break this down again. First of all, you set your goal. So I think without a goal, you're not going to be as driven. I mean, you can just have a membership drive, but if you say we are going to raise our membership by 15% during the current calendar year, that puts a lot of urgency behind the idea. So this project team will get together, somebody that is really great at getting people working together and getting tasks accomplished will maybe be your project manager for the membership drive, and get a team together that's going to do each person a little job. So somebody might contact the utility company to see if they can put a flyer in. You can do newspaper articles. Somebody's going to reach out to friends and family to write letters to the editor or to write newspaper articles on how fabulous friends are. We had that wonderful opportunity in October for the National Friends of Libraries Week, and it's really been great for friends and libraries and trustees to blow the horn of the friends. So it's not for libraries promotion, it's for friends promotion. And I think you would be surprised, and maybe not, how many people have no idea there even is a Friends of the Library group, or even what they are. And I sometimes joke, but it's true. When I, told my friends when I first moved to Philadelphia, I said, they asked me what I did, and I said, well, I worked with Friends, and they said, oh, so you're a Quaker. That's really nice. Because they had no idea about the Friends of the Libraries. And sadly, I think there's a lot of people in every single community who don't even realize that there is a Friends group, and that those Friends groups are making a big difference for their library. So use every opportunity possible to tout what the Friends do, because it's a great way also of bringing in members. So here, I have some examples. The Each One Reach One campaign, a digital media campaign, a great volunteer opportunity for a millennial who will know exactly how to do this and take off with it. You might have a special membership drive event, and that would be something for another little task force to do. In Allen, Texas, they have their chocolate orgy every year, and it's a membership drive. It's what they do is all the active members, and they've got a lot because they do things right there, make some kind of chocolate dessert, and they have wine, and it's free and open to the public, but they hand out membership flyers, and it's not really for them to make money, it's for them to bring in friends, and they've been very successful at it. So this, as the project team works, they will need to know what resources are available to them for this. The leadership team might say, we've got, $1,000 we want to, and I'm making this up, I should probably be a little bit more on point, but depending on what the leadership team wants, they need to determine the budget. So, for example, if it's going to be a mass mailing, there's obviously cost to that. If there's going to be a new brochure, there's a cost to that. The digital campaign, no cost there. You can do something through your newsletter, no cost there. But when you think about all the ways you want to reach out for membership, you have to put a budget behind it and let the membership drive team have easy access to that money. And again, let them sort of work within the budget that you give them and not micromanage what they're doing unless something really goes off track. As I said earlier, it's great to have a liaison from the leadership team just kind of overseeing, making sure everything's going well, but not to micromanage their efforts. I talked enough about getting the right person in the right job. Those job descriptions are, again, really critical, a wonderful thing for the leadership team to roll up their sleeves first thing on after they determine what kind of projects they want in the year ahead. Then they have to figure out exactly what kind of job descriptions for the team leader, the project leader. And the project leader might work with the task force to develop job descriptions for all the various tasks in there. I really sort of was exaggerating on the John and Judy job description for setting up chairs, but they do have to have that information, right? So it could be as simple as that, just telling them what time to show up, and it should be in writing because people forget. I forget all the time. So if you can just do a paragraph on what is expected for each little team, then it really leads to success. The qualities you're looking for, of course, are dependability, comfort using and keeping Excel files, and this is because every single person who gives an hour of their time needs to be put into the database. You want their email, their phone number, and their names, because you want to be able to call on them again. And you might have a little notes file that says they really enjoyed it, they were really great at it, or they might not want to do this kind of work again. They weren't very satisfied with the experience or whatever. Just some notes so that the next person who's reaching out. And you, over time, even in 1 year, you're going to have a database with hundreds of people that you can count on to come in and do some small piece of a project. And just to go back to the job description, again, you need to be clear about how much time will be required altogether, and every week. As I said earlier, is it going to be once a week they have to make some phone calls, or is it they can batch it and every other month they can make phone calls, whatever it is that is required of them. If they're doing a project like and in fact all of them, what is the deadline? When do you want this to occur? You might want an author program in the spring, in the winter, in the fall, and you should have some dates or date ranges for those. And again, you ought to be clear about the qualities of the project director. And it's not wrong to say this is going to be pretty intense for the first couple of months while you roll out the author program, say, but then, once you have all your volunteers doing all the tasks, it's really going to only be a matter of checking in with them to make sure that the task has been completed on their deadline. And if there are special skills and abilities for the position, you need to make those clear as well. One of the ways for getting volunteers is just really advertising for the position in various ways, through social media, through the regular newspaper, through the Friends newsletter, the library's newsletter, perhaps just on the library's website, all of those things. And again, you want to be clear about the time commitment. And one of the big things that I think we miss, and I know a lot of people have a little bit of reluctance to ask somebody else for help, and I think having that job description really makes it easier, especially if it's something as simple as contacting various venues in town, including the library's meeting room if that's appropriate, for an author program. I think if you're going to make it hard for people to say no if you've really distilled these positions down as small as they can be. And the big thing is, as I said earlier, volunteers really want to know that their gift of time and expertise makes a difference. So it's also really important to sort of say, not to say, oh, you'd be doing me a big favor if you'd be on my team, it would really mean a lot to me. It's much better to say, this is going to make a huge difference for the library. We're going to bring people in that have never been in the library before. This bingo night that we're going to plan, we'll bring in people who've never even seen our library. It'll make such a difference for us, and we hope to raise $2,000. So your hour or two of time is really going to make a huge contribution. People want to hear that. They will respond to that. They need to know that they'll have assistance. They're not on their own. There's going to be a written description of what you're asking them to do, and that there are other team members that can help them, and a project leader who can help them if they get stuck. Include your contact information and ask for theirs, and show how the job will be fun and fulfilling. And again, as I said earlier, volunteering is a lot of fun. Most of you out there are volunteers. You're volunteering for your board, you're volunteering because you're a friend, or you have volunteer activities in your life as a librarian. And it is fun, and it does feel so good to give back. So let those be the talking points that you use when bringing on new people. We've got to get over the afraid to ask business, because that's failure. So perhaps I should have said on the leadership team, you have to have people who are willing to reach out. People who are connected, as we said earlier, but even people who are going to reach out to people they don't know, or people they've just met at church or something like that they like. And, when you're talking about what you do and what they do when you meet somebody, and you say, oh, one of the things I do is volunteer for our friends group. In fact, why don't you come and join this task force on that? It's just really fun, and it's not a lot of work, and we have a role for you. So you can bring people in that way, but you've got to be willing to ask. You really do. So the way you recruit people for the team leader, but also for various jobs, is you look to people who've been active in the past, and then think of all the venues you can use to recruit people: church bulletins, local radio stations, in articles in senior living communities. That's a huge resource of potential volunteers. These retirement communities where you have to be 55 or older to come in. There are a lot of people who are 55 to 65 to 75 who are very, very active and really look forward to opportunities to contribute. So that's a really good place. And knowing that kids, college kids, are actually doing a lot of volunteer work in their free time, even those who have graduated, but including those that are still in college. If it's something as simple as you need somebody to let's say you're going to paint the meeting room and you need volunteers, to come in. You've purchased the paint and everything, and you've got somebody who's going to oversee, so it's not a big fat mess. But you're only asking them to come in on one Saturday to work from maybe 10 till 1 to help paint, and then pizza and sodas will be provided afterwards. You'd be surprised at the college or high school students you can recruit that way. And, of course, the social media is important. Be sure anybody who's expressed an interest in helping is contacted. That is something that amazes me, and I think a lot of times it's a breakdown in the current way that friends groups are structured. So they have a membership team, and then they have the treasurer. So people are joining, in most friends brochures they say, would you like to volunteer? And, there's check-off boxes for various tasks, and so the person puts in their $25 and checks off these 3 places that they would be willing to contribute, and then those brochures are sent into the treasurer, who enters the money and puts the brochure in the recycle or something. That disconnect of following up is bigger than you might imagine. So it's really important that anybody who expressed an interest gets a return contact. We talked about online recruitment, but we also need to talk a little bit about virtual volunteering. Many friends groups, for example, are selling books online. And to me, a homebound person who's really wanting to contribute, maybe really loves to read, and maybe came out of, a literary background, a teacher perhaps or somebody, but maybe they aren't able to come out very much or just don't want to. If you had a volunteer that took them online books, they could sit at home easily and be a virtual volunteer and list those books on the eBay or Amazon or whatever venues that you're using to sell online books. So more and more, I think we need to think about ways that people can volunteer virtually. If you're looking for somebody to find a venue, that's phone call from home, right? If you're looking for authors, that's getting in touch with publishers and perhaps local authors and making those phone calls. So they don't necessarily need to ever really show up. They just need to complete that task that you give them. So I think more and more we need to think about the fact that they don't need to come in or even show their face to do a lot of the work that needs to be done. So you can also recruit the old-fashioned way, call friends and neighbors. Again, I cannot emphasize how much you're going to get the yes instead of the no when you have a discrete task you're asking, and you're telling them exactly when it needs to be done, and you're telling them how much it contributes to the library and how much fun it is. It's really hard for people to say no to something like that. You can target members in your other groups. So I mentioned, maybe you meet somebody at church, but there's also the yoga class, and there's all the different venues that your volunteers are already participating in. That's kind of the nature of volunteers, that if they're volunteering for the library, it's not unlikely that they're volunteering or joining other types of groups, because clearly they're people that are wanting to be out and active and busy. I'm going to just break this down again for for the author fundraising event, just to show you how simple it is. So you do determine that type of time of year you want to hold the event. You determine what resources are available. Maybe you're not going to have any resources available. Maybe what you're wanting is to get volunteers to bring in refreshments, and you want a local author who will do it for free, and maybe they just in exchange for selling their books. You want the job description. You want to appoint a liaison from the project, from the leadership team, to just sort of oversee and provide support. And then you need to reach out and recruit the project team leader. Obviously, the project team leader is going to be a much greater investment of time. So you have to think about people who have done other sorts of volunteering, have done, are active, who you can count on, and who would be willing to be more engaged and spend more hours, but will have the really wonderful feeling of accomplishment. So when you have that author event, the project team leader can meet the author and introduce the author and have sort of pride of place there in that program. So in addition to making a contribution to the library, they've also get some real self-reward as well. So after you've found your project team leader, what the team's going to have to do is find and confirm the author. So that's maybe one person doing that. It might be two. Find and confirm the venue. That's just one person. The group together might determine the pricing. If this is a money maker, how much are you going to charge? Somebody's going to have to order the books for signing or partner with a local bookstore. You'll have to determine how you're going to market this program, because as you all know, I think we've all faced a wonderful program, great speaker who's shown up to 5 people in the audience. Ouch. So you really do want to determine what the marketing strategy is and divide up the tasks involved with that. As I said earlier, could be a variety of things, such as a social media campaign, article in the newspaper, flyers around town. So once you determine that strategy, once again, you've developed these small, discrete tasks. So somebody's going to make flyers and distribute them around town. Somebody's going to write an article for the paper. Somebody else is going to do the social media part of it. And when you break it down like that, who's going to say no? Not very many people. So you also need to develop an on-site task force to take tickets and provide refreshments, to host, welcome people and clean up. And you need that to keep the executive liaison in the loop, so everything is moving along well. And this isn't rocket science, but it is something different, because instead of 8 people doing all the work for the library friends, you're going to have a database of at least 100 people if you do this at the end of the year. And how great is that? And it's just going to continue growing. And by the way, when people do contribute their time and effort into, say they're the ones that distribute flyers around town, maybe they might use the library occasionally, but haven't really thought about, all the wonderful things friends do. So you're recruiting them on sort of 2 levels. You're recruiting them to do work for your organization, but you're also recruiting them to be great supporters and advocates for the library. And that's another thing. When you have that large database and the city or county wants to cut your library budget, guess what? You've got hundreds of emails that can go instantly out to people to say, please show up at our town hall meeting. Please contact your city council member. Please call the mayor. You have a ready-made advocacy task force. So at the end of the day, you want the leadership team, perhaps with those project managers, want to evaluate the success and weakness, and perhaps keep a log of it somehow, so that the next person who does it, and you'll be amazed at how many project leaders will want to do it again and again. But even if that's not the case, you want to have that information about what went well and what could be done better. you want to get contact information for everyone, as I said. Ask those who shine if they'd like to be involved with another project to work on, maybe a different one, maybe the same one next year. And as I said earlier, don't rule out college kids, high school students. Gen Xers and Gen Ys are also great potential volunteers. Again, I know it's ad nauseum, but when you're asking people to just do one small task, you're going to get a lot of yeses. And, of course, the most important tip of all, everybody needs to get some kind of thank you. It surprises me, and I've done lots of volunteering, and almost all the time it's like, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so glad you're here. You're just wonderful. I really appreciate it. I get an abundance. But once in a while, I do volunteer work. No one says anything to me. And that doesn't stop me from wanting to volunteer, even with the same organization, but it doesn't feel too good either. So maybe you have one person who's in charge of emailing thank yous or calling thank yous or writing thank you notes. Maybe that's one small job you have for somebody to do, but it's really important. So that's the end of my formal presentation. I would love it if you have some questions, like somebody wants to know, is it easier to recruit when you have small, discrete tasks? Maybe you have something else that you would like to ask.
All right. Thank you so much, Sally. And Sally, would you mind if we shared your email address in the chat box if people have follow-up questions for you?
Absolutely, and I'm so glad you asked that, because in addition, if you would put our website address, that would be great as well, because we have so many tools, whether you're members or of United for Libraries or not, and we'd love for you to join, but of course that's not always possible for all of you. We have still a lot of free resources, including how to start a friends group, so that might be really useful to you. We have a lot of fact sheets and tip sheets for trustees, so please do visit our web as well.
Okay.
And I'm sorry?
Oh, great. I just wanted to mention that Jean is sharing both your website and your email address in the chat box right now. So if people have questions, they can follow up with you. But we did have a few questions come in. Marcia asked, are samples of job descriptions available on your site? You talked a lot about that in the presentation today.
We do have a tip sheet with 2 sample job descriptions, but I think it's a great question, and I'm making a note of it. It might be nice to just have, 5 or 10 job descriptions available for people to use. That's a very good question, and I will follow up on that.
Great, thank you. Rachel asks, can Sally address financial support of libraries, meaning library projects to support friends, friends approvals for requests, annual allocation versus periodic project requests?
Okay, and does this mean coming from the director to the friends?
Yes.
Okay, well, I think we have a couple of resources, fact sheets on our website that would address this, but we have one called, and I don't know if this is what the person's getting at, but when friends aren't friendly, we do have a number of instances that we hear about friends raising the money and then feeling it's their money and not really the library's money, and that's kind of a subtle distinction, but it's one that ends up costing a lot of anguish between friends and directors. Our stand is, our feeling is the best practice is that the director brings the leadership team in once a year, perhaps at budget time, or if there's going to be problems with the budget, well before budget time, because you might need some advocacy. But having a strategic session with the Friends leadership about where the library is going and what it's going to take to get there in the coming year, just the year ahead, like if you're facing a budget cut, what does that mean, and how can the Friends help either through advocacy or filling some gaps in the budget. And I think that when the librarian does this with the Friends, it gets everybody on the same page so that when the library director provides her wish list, which is what we recommend, in a prioritized order, it's no surprise to the Friends because they already saw it coming due to that strategic planning. And an example I like to give is if the library's meeting with I mean, if the library's understanding that they've got a lot of new Vietnamese residents coming into the community and they don't have any Vietnamese resources, and that's something that they're going to be working on in the coming year, and programs and helping the kids acclimate to their new world. And then when the library director's wish list includes a startup Vietnamese English language collection, it's not going to be a surprise, and it's going to make sense. So the friends are going to say yes. But I think it's important that the director doesn't treat the friends as an open checkbook, and that the friends understand that the money they raise is for the library, not for their bank account. And when people give money to the friends, they assume it's going to be turned over to the library to be used as most needed. So those two pieces have to come together.
Great. Before we get to the next question, Mary, I want to address yours. Yes, I will send the website and email out in the follow-up email. So if any of you are listening in on your phones, you will get that as well in your follow-up. So don't worry about it if you don't see the screen right now. Question from Sue: what kind of non-traditional fundraisers have you seen?
Oh, lots of kind of fun ones. I'm not sure how non-traditional, but many of you have probably heard of like the Antiques Roadshow type fundraiser. Those are always really fun, and they bring in a lot of people who aren't really aware of the friends and maybe don't even use the library. So I won't go into that too much. It's kind of self-evident. You get somebody who can evaluate books or evaluate antiques and give that valuation to people who pay to get that valuation. That's how that one works. One of the fun ones, I can't remember where, but it's somewhere in the west part of the country, there was a cow flop bingo game, and it was in conjunction with their annual fair, and what they did was draw little squares in a pasture with numbers on them, and then they sold tickets to those numbers. And if the cow flopped in the right square, then that person got half the money or whatever. So that, I think, was a pretty fun one. I think that one of the things I really think for getting this newer generation is a little bit more sophistication in the kinds of fundraising events you do. So wine and cheese, beer tastings, lots of that, beer and brew, brew and books. A lot of libraries are doing that, which is really fun. So, but I think rather than just the cookies and punch kind of thing, that's not going to probably bring in the millennials and even the baby boomers. They're going to want something a little bit more sophisticated.
I think the wine and beer can bring that group in, because I'm in that group.
So I hate to say, but it's really social and people really enjoy it.
Absolutely. Another question: what is the typical relationship between friends and trustees?
Oh, such a good question. It is so important that the library friends and the library trustees clearly understand their very separate and distinct roles. And we have two fact sheets that you'll find on our website. One is the role of the trustees and the role of the friends. And they should be very friendly with one another, but friends sometimes kind of forget that they don't set policy or that they don't make purchasing decisions, that sort of thing. So we have a role and responsibility table also on our website that shows, and the library director. There can also be a lot of confusion sometimes between the trustees and the library director about who's really in charge and who manages the library. So please check out those items on our website, and if you can't find them, just email me and I'll send them to you. But they're very distinct roles. The trustees govern, the friends raise money. The librarian decides how that money is spent, in conjunction with talking with the friends. I mean, it needs to be symbiotic, but in the end, it's the library director who's evaluated on how spending decisions were made. So it's the library director who should ultimately have the yay or nay on any kind of gift.
Great. And actually, we have a great follow-up question to that. Any tips on how to tactfully transition friends away from treating the staff as their staff? Our friends group thinks the library staff is there to serve them, not vice versa.
Okay. Well, once again, we have a fact sheet on that as well to decide how do you determine when staff time is being overused by friends. And I'm trying to think right now of what the name of that is.
I'm actually on your site right now, and I'm under friends group and fact sheet.
fact sheet, yeah. So maybe go down a little further. I think it's in the 20s, the fact sheet number.
Okay. Are you seeing it?
Not yet. I'm not. There we go. Guidelines for giving. No, let's see.
When friends aren't friendly?
Well, that's not the one I was thinking of. It's how much library time should be used.
Okay.
Maybe it's the same memorandum. So, a library support for friends activities. There it is, number 26.
Okay.
So that kind of answers the question. I think what you need to what you have to decide is, and the question was, how do we tactfully? I think you could use this fact sheet maybe to say, for the director to say, you know, we love what you do and it's great for the library, but the amount of staff time dedicated is too much. We're not getting the return on that investment, and by the way, we've had to reduce staff because of budget cuts in the past, so it's even harder. And the other thing I would say tactfully is, you know, that maybe you attended this webinar and you realize now that the Friends are not going to be sustainable without reaching out to a lot of people for help, and that shouldn't be staff. And if they want to create that database and grow their Friends group and bring in new active members, they really need to reach out to those people. Again, it's that 8 or 9 or 10 people doing all the work, and they can't do all the work, so they're depending on the staff, and that's not sustainable. That group is going to die, and sometimes that's okay. Letting a group die is sometimes okay because then you can start fresh, but that's just, they need to be reaching out. That's kind of the whole point of getting to today's volunteers, is reaching out.
Okay. We have time for one more question. Is there a recommendation on what percentage of the Friends money in your account should be spent and how much should be held in reserve?
And again, another fact sheet on that. Now, there's a difference between Friends and foundations. So in my vernacular, Friends are the ones, boots on the ground, raising lots and lots of smaller gifts to give to the library, whereas foundations are doing the planned giving, the big bucks kind of thing, and creating endowments and all of that sort of thing. So that's different. So Friends, in my description, are those people who raise lots of little money. We think that they should give it, almost all of it, to the library every year for several reasons, and it is in the fact sheets. I think it was that first one, Guidelines for Giving.
Okay.
It's called, and that guideline for giving will tell you will tell the Friends that really people will stop giving if they find out that their money's sitting in a bank account and isn't helping the Friends, and it's not doing the library any favors, and plus it doesn't create that urgency for fundraising the next year if they're just sitting on money. That's that old style Friends group that's not going to be sustainable. They need to always be reaching out and making more money for the library. So we recommend that they give almost all of it, maybe with just enough operating expenses to get started for the next year.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Sally, for all of the great information. Clearly, you have a lot of great information on your website. I want to remind all of you that Sally's presentation will be located on our trustee website, which I have up on the screen right now under the recordings area. We'll hopefully get that up later today. So again, thank you, Sally. Thank all of you for your questions and listening in. I want to remind all of you that tomorrow's session is with Valerie Gross on a new vision, why Wisconsin needs libraries more than ever, and that will also start at 12 p.m. So I hope all of you have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see some of you on here tomorrow as well. So long.